The courtroom clock struck 10:20 a.m. on an ordinary Thursday morning in Providence, Rhode Island. The bailiff's voice echoed through the chamber with practiced efficiency. Case number 12847, Theodore Langston, charged with failure to appear and contempt of court. The podium before Judge Frank Caprio stood empty. At 10:15, the judge glanced at the vacant space, his expression revealing the first hints of displeasure. By 10:30, Judge Caprio's patience, legendary in its depth, had begun to wear thin. The courtroom spectators shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the mounting tension. "Bailiff, has Mr. Langston contacted the court?" Judge Caprio's voice carried an edge that regulars in his courtroom recognized immediately. "No, Your Honor. No communication whatsoever." 10 minutes later, at precisely 10:40 a.m., the courtroom doors swung open with theatrical timing. What happened next would become one of the most talked-about moments in Judge Caprio's distinguished career. Theodore Langston didn't simply enter the courtroom, he made an entrance. At 54 years old, the tech CEO carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. His charcoal Tom Ford suit, tailored to perfection, probably cost more than the average person's monthly mortgage. A Rolex Daytona glinted on his wrist, catching the fluorescent lights overhead. Wireless headphones hung around his neck like a status symbol. But it was what he was doing that made every head in the courtroom turn. Theodore Langston was on his phone, conducting business as if the court were merely an inconvenient interruption to his day. "I don't care what the board says. Make it happen. That's why I pay you," he said loudly, his voice carrying throughout the silent courtroom. His eyes briefly met Judge Caprio's, and rather than showing any sign of remorse or awareness, he simply held up one finger in a universal gesture that meant, "Give me a minute." Judge Caprio's expression transformed from judicial patience to barely contained astonishment. "No, tell Singapore we're pulling out if they don't agree by Friday," Langston continued, as if addressing an empty conference room rather than a court of law. "Sir," Judge Caprio's voice cut through the space like a knife. "Sir, end that call immediately." Langston glanced up, his face registering annoyance at the interruption. He didn't end the call. Instead, he turned slightly away and said into his phone, "Yeah, I've got to go. Some court thing. Just handle it." Only then did he finally disconnect, and even then he offered no apology. Judge Caprio's voice had dropped to a temperature that could freeze water. "Your name?" "Theodore Langston." He delivered it like an announcement, as if the judge should not only recognize it but be impressed by it. "Mr. Langston, you were ordered to appear in this courtroom at 10:00 a.m. It is now 10:42. Can you explain why you are 42 minutes late to a contempt hearing?" Theodore Langston shrugged. It wasn't a casual movement born of uncertainty. It was a dismissive gesture that conveyed his assessment of the question's importance, which was to say, not important at all. "Traffic," he said simply. "You know how it is." "Traffic." Judge Caprio repeated the word, as if examining it for hidden meaning. "You couldn't call the court to notify us of your delay." "I'm here now, aren't I? Let's just get this over with. I have a meeting at 11:30. A ripple of disbelief moved through the courtroom gallery. Those familiar with Judge Caprio's courtroom knew that such cavalier disrespect was unprecedented. The judge's reputation for fairness and patience was matched only by his insistence on proper decorum and respect for the legal process. Judge Caprio opened the file before him with deliberate care. "Mr. Langston, according to these records, you are the CEO of Langston Technologies. Is that correct?" "That's correct." Pride colored his voice. In his world, the title was armor, credentials, and justification all rolled into one. "And you failed to appear for a traffic citation hearing 3 weeks ago. No call, no explanation. You simply didn't show up. That failure resulted in this contempt charge." Do you understand why that's a problem? Langston exhaled, with barely concealed impatience. Look, Your Honor. He said the title as if it were a formality he was obligated to observe. I run a company worth $400 million. I employ 700 people. I have responsibilities that, frankly, are more important than a parking ticket. Judge Caprio's eyebrows rose slowly. More important than a court order. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it, Mr. Langston? Whatever thin veneer of patience Theodore Langston possessed evaporated in that moment. What I mean is, I'm a busy man. I forgot. It happens. Can we just pay the fine and move on? I'll write you a check right now. To the astonishment of everyone present, he actually produced a checkbook from his jacket pocket, holding it up as if settling a restaurant bill. Mr. Langston, put that checkbook away. Judge Caprio's voice had hardened into something resembling granite. This isn't about money. This is about respect for the legal process. Respect? Langston's voice rose, his composure cracking. I've built a company from nothing. I've created jobs. I pay more in taxes in 1 year than most people make in 10. I think I've earned some respect. You've earned financial success, Mr. Langston. That doesn't earn you the right to ignore court orders. Theodore Langston laughed, a short, condescending sound that carried through the courtroom like a slap. Your Honor, with all due respect, you don't understand the world I operate in. Split-second decisions. Millions of dollars on the line. I can't be worried about parking tickets. This stopped being about parking tickets the moment you ignored a court order. You are here on a contempt charge. That's a crime. A crime? Langston's face flushed red. That's ridiculous. I'm not a criminal. I'm a businessman. A successful one. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his voice measured and precise. Mr. Langston, success does not place you above the law, no matter how much money you've made. And that's when Theodore Langston made the catastrophic mistake that would define this entire proceeding. He leaned on the podium, looked Judge Caprio directly in the eye, and with absolute certainty declared, Your Honor, you cannot judge me the same way you judge regular people. The courtroom fell into a silence so complete that the ventilation system suddenly seemed deafening. Judge Caprio's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Excuse me. I said you can't judge me like everyone else. I'm not everyone else. Then who are you, Mr. Langston? Theodore straightened to his full height, chest out, chin raised, radiating pure arrogance from every pore. Do you know who I am? In my industry, in my company, among my peers. I am God. Several people in the gallery gasped audibly. Langston continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a keynote address. What I say happens. When I make decisions, 700 people's livelihoods depend on me. I control outcomes. I create reality. He paused for dramatic effect. So when I tell you that missing a court date isn't a big deal, when I tell you I have more important things to handle, you need to understand. I operate on a different level than the people who usually stand here. The courtroom had frozen. This man had just compared himself to God, in a court of law, to a sitting judge. Several spectators had their mouths open in shock. Judge Caprio sat completely still for 5 long seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice could have cut glass. Mr. Langston, did you just refer to yourself as God? It's a metaphor, Your Honor, for the level of authority and responsibility I carry. I see. And does this God status exempt you from Rhode Island law? Theodore realized, too late, that he had crossed a line. But his ego, that powerful, all-consuming force that had propelled him to success, wouldn't allow him to retreat. What I'm saying is that my time is more valuable than... Stop. Judge Caprio's voice cracked like a whip. Your time is more valuable than what? Than court? Then the legal system? Then the rule of law that applies equally to every citizen? Judge Caprio's eyes blazed with controlled fury. Let me tell you what you are in my courtroom, Mr. Langston. You're a man who broke the law, a man who ignored a court order, a man who showed up 42 minutes late without apology, a man who thinks his bank account buys him privilege. He opened the statute book with deliberate slowness. Theodore watched, his confidence finally beginning to crack, like ice under pressure. Mr. Langston, contempt of court in Rhode Island carries a maximum penalty of 6 months in jail and a $5,000 fine. Do you understand that? Theodore's face went pale. 6 months, that's excessive for missing a court date. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you didn't just miss a court date. You ignored it. Then you showed up late to your contempt hearing. Then you disrespected this court repeatedly. Judge Caprio's voice rose. And then you told me you're God. It was a metaphor. It was arrogance. Pure, unfiltered arrogance. And I'm going to teach you something your money apparently hasn't taught you. Humility. Judge Caprio began making notes in the file. First, the original traffic citation. That was a $75 parking fine. Because you failed to appear, it's now $250. Theodore winced, but remained silent. Second, contempt of court for failure to appear, $1,000. Your Honor, I'm not finished. Third, you showed up 42 minutes late today with no valid excuse. That's another contempt charge. Another $1,000. Theodore's jaw dropped. $2,000 for being late? No. $2,000 for showing contempt for this court. Twice. Judge Caprio's eyes were steel. But we're still not done. What else could there possibly be? Your behavior in this courtroom today. The phone call you refused to end immediately. The dismissive attitude. The checkbook stunt. The I am God speech. That demonstrates willful disrespect for judicial authority. He wrote deliberately. I am adding another $2,000 in fines for obstruction and disrespect to the court. Theodore's face had gone from pale to crimson. $4,000 total. This is outrageous. Is it? Judge Caprio's voice carried a hint of dark satisfaction. You said you pay more in taxes in 1 year than most people make in 10. You said your time is more valuable. You compared yourself to God, so $4,000 should be pocket change for a deity. The courtroom erupted in applause. Someone actually shouted, "Yes!" Theodore tried one last desperate gambit. Your Honor, I'm going to appeal this. My lawyers will... Your lawyers will review the courtroom video where you called yourself God and told me I can't judge you. I'm sure that will go wonderfully. Please appeal. I'd love to see an appellate court's reaction to your testimony. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. His voice took on a different quality, still firm but tinged with something almost resembling compassion. Mr. Langston, you said you employ 700 people. Those people depend on you for their livelihoods. Have you considered what kind of leader you're being when you think laws don't apply to you? I never said... You said it with every action today. Showing up late, refusing to end your phone call, pulling out a checkbook like you can buy your way, out of responsibility, calling yourself God. What does that teach your employees? That success means you're above consequences. Theodore had no answer. Let me tell you what I see, Judge Caprio continued. I see a man who has achieved financial success and confused it with moral superiority. I see someone who thinks wealth equals wisdom. I see a CEO who has never been told no and doesn't know how to handle it. His voice softened slightly, but lost none of its power. Mr. Langston, you're 54 years old. You've built a successful company. That's genuinely admirable. But success without humility is just arrogance. Money without respect is just paper. And power without accountability is tyranny. "Are you giving me a philosophy lesson?" Theodore asked, his voice dripping with disdain. Wrong response. Catastrophically wrong. Judge Caprio's voice went cold again. "No, I'm giving you a reality check. $4,250 in fines, due in 30 days. If you fail to pay, a warrant will be issued for your arrest. And Mr. Langston, when the police come to your $400 million company to arrest its CEO, you can tell them you're God. See if they care." Theodore Langston left the courtroom shaking, whether with rage, humiliation, or the dawning realization of what had just happened. No one could say for certain. As he pushed through the courtroom doors, an older man in an expensive suit intercepted him in the hallway. "Mr. Langston, I'm Victor Chen. I'm on the board of directors at Langston Technologies." Theodore's face, if possible, went even paler. A board member had witnessed everything. "Victor, I can explain." "Don't." Victor's voice was quiet but firm. "I sat in that courtroom and watched you disrespect a judge, show up late without apology, and call yourself God. The board will be discussing this." "It's not." "I didn't mean—" "You meant every word, and it reveals everything we've been concerned about. Your leadership style, your disregard for accountability, the way you treat people you see as beneath you." Victor Chen walked away, leaving Theodore standing alone in the courthouse corridor, the weight of consequences finally, truly hitting him. 3 days later, Theodore's outburst made tech industry headlines. The courtroom video went viral, accumulating millions of views within hours. Social media exploded with commentary. CEO calls himself God in court, gets destroyed by judge. This is what happens when nobody tells you no for 20 years. Judge Caprio just gave a masterclass in humility. 1 week after the hearing, the board of directors at Langston Technologies called an emergency meeting. Victor Chen proposed mandatory leadership training for all executives, starting with the CEO. The vote was unanimous. Theodore issued a public statement. "I apologize for my behavior in court. I let arrogance cloud my judgment. I'm committed to being a better leader and a better person." He paid the $4,250 fine on time. 6 months later, employees at Langston Technologies began noticing changes. The CEO was different, still driven, still successful, but somehow humbler. He listened more. He thanked people more often. He showed up to meetings on time. He treated everyone with respect, regardless of their position. At a company town hall, a junior developer raised her hand. "Mr. Langston, I've noticed you've changed. What happened?" Theodore paused, considered his words carefully, and smiled. A genuine smile, not the practice one from before. "I met a judge who reminded me I'm not God. Best lesson I ever learned." Theodore Langston walked into court thinking his success made him untouchable. He left $4,000 poorer and infinitely wiser. Judge Caprio proved that courtrooms are the great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you're worth $400 million or $40. The law applies equally. Respect is mandatory, and calling yourself God just proves you need the most humility. This is what happens when a CEO forgets he's human, when wealth becomes a shield instead of a responsibility, and when one judge reminds an arrogant man that in a courtroom, there's only one authority, and it isn't him. Theodore learned the most expensive lesson of his life. You can be a god in your industry, but in a court of law, you're just another citizen who has to follow the rules. Sometimes the best education money can't buy comes from the one place where money doesn't matter, a courtroom where justice is truly blind to the size of your bank account.